everyone. I am so happy to see you, and again, sorry about my mess. Change this. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about personality disorders, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Start from the beginning. All right, so personalities are, let's start with what we're going to learn today. So our objectives are to describe why it's important to identify personality disorders. We also want to understand the etiology of personality disorders, identify how to maybe look for personality disorders, and the key features of each disorder. So personality disorders are an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that manifests in two or more of the following. It can be present in your cognition, the way you think and perceive the world, your feelings, intensity and mood swings, relationships, impulse control, and functioning. The pattern is stable and can be traced back to adolescence or early adulthood, and it's really an ingrained way of functioning that's part of the personality. So with some of our other mood disorders and things, it's easy to say that, this is something that could happen or could be an isolated occurrence. But with personality disorders, it's really an ingrained way of being and behaving in the world. So that's something to look for when you're thinking about possibly diagnosing someone with a personality disorder. You want to look at how long has this been going on and how pervasive is it, and how much is it ingrained in who they are as a person. So the importance of diagnosing personality disorders is it really helps you manage expectations, and it helps you understand how to treat the disorder. And really 6 to 13% of the adult population in the US has a personality disorder. So it's a pretty high rate of occurrence. But it helps you have a much deeper understanding of how to best treat them. Different personality disorders have different types of treatment. And it also helps you, like once you get the personality disorder addressed, then you can assess for comorbidity. It helps you manage expectations and boundary crossings. Because some of these personality disorders can be really stubborn and difficult to treat. And so maybe your expectations or even their expectations can be a little different for a personality disorder compared to something that could be more transient or helped with medication. Although medication can help some, it can't help maybe in the same ways it could for major depressive disorder or anxiety disorders. It helps you understand their behavior and emotional distress. And again, it can protect you from inappropriate relationships and engaging in medical practice outside your standard of care. So some of these may be a little too intense, and maybe you don't have the tools to treat most effectively. And so then you would want to refer your clients, obviously, to a higher level of care. What I'm thinking of here is like the possibility of working with someone with borderline personality disorder that has recurrent suicidal thoughts. And maybe you're hitting a wall, and the safety planning and the processing and all of the coping strategies that you're putting into place maybe aren't as effective because they need a higher level of care, such as like dialectical behavioral therapy, which is an evidence-based treatment for borderline personality disorder that is very effective. So something to consider. So as you can see here, pretty high prevalence for all of these. So I'm not going to read these off to you, but you can just take a look for a minute. Etiology. So why does this happen? How does this start? Well, just like any other mental health disorder or condition, there's a whole host of reasons why someone is the way that they are. But there are genetic and environmental factors that can contribute. If someone genetically came from someone who maybe has a personality disorder, it might be a higher likelihood that they end up with a personality themselves. Also, chaotic environments with abuse or trauma involved growing up can really contribute, and other factors as well. Cultural influences. So studies have found that in Norway compared to the US, Germany and UK, avoidant personality disorder is 3 to 4 times more prevalent. Dependent personality is 2 to 3 times more prevalent, and schizoid is 2 times more prevalent. And borderline is about half as frequent, and antisocial is half as prevalent. So lower rates of borderline and antisocial disorder, higher rates of avoidant and dependent and schizoid in different European countries. So we have to ask ourselves, what's happening culturally that's different there that is impacting their rates, compared to the United States? Pattern exhibits increased internalization. Personality disorders are prevalent, and externalization disorders are rarer. So the internalized personality disorders are a lot more prevalent in those countries, as opposed to externalizing disorders such as borderline disorder and antisocial that affects other people more. So there are 3 clusters for personality disorders, and that's cluster A, which is suspicious, odd, and odd types. That includes paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. And then we have cluster B, which is dramatic, and that's antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. And cluster C, which is anxious, avoidant, dependent, obsessive, compulsive. So let's talk paranoid personality disorder. A pervasive distrust and suspiciousness of others such that their motives are interpreted as malevolent. So they are paranoid. They suspect others are exploiting or deceiving them. They're preoccupied with unjustified doubts of loyalty. They're reluctant to confide in others because they believe that they will use the information against them. Reads hidden demeaning meanings into benign remarks. Persistently bears a grudge. Perceives attack on character. Recurrent suspicions regarding fidelity, a spouse or sexual partner, and does not occur during schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar, etc. So you definitely want to rule out those other types of diagnoses that could be contributing. And really look at the pattern of behavior over time. Is this part of the personality, or are they experiencing psychosis? So then we have schizoid personality disorder, which is a pervasive pattern of detachment from social relationships and restricted expression of emotion with 4 of the following. Neither desires nor enjoys close relationships, almost always chooses solitary activities, little if any interest in sexual experiences with another person, takes pleasure in few if any activities, lacks close friends other than first-degree relatives, and appears indifferent to the praise or criticism of others, and shows emotional coldness or flattened affect. So I'm thinking of someone, just to throw a case study out for you, maybe a 34-year-old man who's never really had close relationships and does not care to have close relationships. He works in a mailroom and by himself most of the day and feels very content to do so. He comes home at the end of the day and does not spend time with very many people. Maybe his mother brings him into treatment because she's concerned about his social relationships, but he's totally fine with being pretty isolated. Now, we want to also rule out the possibility of autism spectrum disorder because, as we know, there are some similarities there between the two. Then there's schizotypal personality disorder. So this is a pervasive pattern of social and interpersonal deficits with reduced capacity for close relationships, as well as cognitive or perceptual distortions and eccentricities of behavior with 5 or more of the following. So ideas of reference, odd beliefs or magical thinking, unusual perceptual experiences, including bodily illusions, odd thinking and speech, suspiciousness or paranoid ideation, inappropriate or constricted affect, behavior or appearance that is odd or eccentric, lack of close friends other than first-degree relatives, and excessive social anxiety that does not diminish with familiarity. Obviously, you want to rule out schizophrenia. Maybe they're not hearing voices or anything, but they do have some different kinds of beliefs. or magical thinking, odd beliefs. So there's really a fine line between believing in something and having faith in a certain belief system and having delusions or psychotic thoughts. So this person might be a part of a fringe group online, and that's the only social interaction that they have. Maybe they stay at home and work online, but they also have some interesting magical thinking ideas on top that kind of differentiates them from the schizotypal personality disorder, and they might look and believe things that are a little eccentric. And then there's antisocial personality disorder, which was covered in our conduct disorder and impulse control disorders chapter. But basically, this is going to be your classic person, murderer, rapist, someone who does not care about hurting other people. They don't care to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behavior. They're deceitful, they're impulsive, they're aggressive, and they do not care about the safety of others. And there's a lack of remorse. And of course, there's evidence of conduct disorder with onset before age 18. So you may want to go back and look at the other video about conduct disorders, because I kind of outlined some of the things there as well. But you're going to see this in high rates in the prison population. Neuroimaging and psychopathy. So a study by Blair found a person with psychopathic tendencies showed decreased amygdala and orbitofrontal cortex responses to emotionally provocative stimuli, which the author felt was suggestive of difficulties with basic forms of emotional learning and decision-making. So, there are actual differences in the brain here for antisocial personality disorders. And what I'm really hearing when I read this is there's a lack of empathy. So the inability in the brain to fire in a way that elicits empathy for another human. All right, we're moving on to borderline personality disorder. So borderline personality disorder is a pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships and self-image that affects and affects and marked impulsivity as indicated by 5 or more of the following: frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between idealization and devaluation. So they're either totally in love with the person or they hate them. Identity disturbance, so a lack of understanding of who they are, or it changes very rapidly, or it changes when they meet someone new who they are idealizing, and then all of a sudden they're taking on all of their characteristics. There's impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging: recurrent suicidal behaviors, gestures or threats, or self-mutilating behaviors. So this is, your non-suicidal self-injury, recklessness, overeating, binge eating, engaging in risky sex practices, or substance abuse. Affective instability due to a marked reactivity of mood, so lots of mood swings, chronic feelings of emptiness, inappropriate anger, and transient stress-related paranoia. So sometimes dissociation, meaning they check out when it gets to be too much. And then there's histrionic personality disorder, which is a pervasive pattern of excessive emotionality and attention seeking indicated by greater than 5 of the following: uncomfortable situations in which they're not the center of attention. Interaction with others is often characterized by inappropriate, sexually seductive behavior. Displays rapidly shifting and shallow expression of emotion. Consistently uses physical appearance to draw attention to self. Has a style of speech that is excessively impressionistic and lacking in detail. Shows self-dramatization and exaggerated emotion. Is suggestible and considers relationships to be more intimate than they are. So this person very much needs the flattery, the attention. They'll definitely kind of go with the whims of other people if they can get the attention that they are looking for. And if someone else is the center of attention, they're going to find a way to get the attention, either through seductive behavior or being bigger and louder and better somehow than anyone else in the room. And then we have narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior, a need for admiration, a lack of empathy is indicated by more than 5 of the following. So a grandiose sense of self-importance, preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, or beauty. They believe that they're special and can only be understood or should associate with other special or high status people. They might pull you in and say, oh, you're special like me, or you just understand. People like us can only understand. That kind of thing requires excessive admiration, has a sense of entitlement, is interpersonally exploitative. So they'll do whatever they have to do to get what they want. There is a lack of empathy, so they don't really care about other people. They only care about themselves and elevating their status. And they're often envious of others and believe others are envious of them, and they show arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. And then we have avoidant personality disorder, which is basically the exact opposite. And it involves a pattern of social inhibition, feelings of inadequacy, and hypersensitivity to negative evaluation, as indicated by more than 4 of the following. Avoid social occupations that involve significant interpersonal contact, so very few counselors would be avoidant personality types. They're unwilling to get involved with people unless they're certain of being liked. Preoccupied with being criticized in social situations. They show restraint in intimate relationships for fear of being shamed or ridiculed. They are inhibited in new interpersonal situations because they feel inadequate. They show self as socially inept and unappealing. So they definitely don't feel good about themselves. They're unusually reluctant to take personal risks or engage in any new activities because they may prove embarrassing. They show restraint in intimate relationships because of fear of being shamed or ridiculed. They're inhibited in new interpersonal situations because of feeling inadequate. And they view self as socially inept and unappealing. And they're usually reluctant. Oh, that's a repeat. Reluctant to take okay, that's a repeat too. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, guys. Basically, they avoid social situations or any situation that could involve meeting new people because they feel down about themselves and inadequate. Now, dependent personality is a little different. So the last one, it's more focused on almost social anxiety, but the dependent personality disorder is really characterized by an excessive need to be taken care of that leads to submissive and clinging behaviors and fears of separation, as indicated by more than 5 of the following. So this person cannot take care of themselves. They need someone else to do almost everything for them. And they have difficulty making everyday decisions without an excessive amount of reassurance. They need others to assume responsibility for most major areas of their life. They have difficulty expressing disagreement with others because of fear of loss of approval, difficulty initiating projects on their own because of lack of confidence. They go to excessive lengths to obtain nurturance and support. They feel uncomfortable or helpless when alone. They urgently seek another relationship as a source of care and support when a relationship ends, which is very tough because if they're depending on one person completely for their security, they may scramble to find another relationship that will support them. And they're unrealistically preoccupied with fears of being left to take care of themselves. So this takes submissive to a whole new level. You may find that as a clinician that overly dependent individuals will be very flattering to you, but they're also just in some ways looking for you to make the decisions. So you have to really be careful not to give into that and to try to help them build some autonomy on their own and not start making them overly dependent on you in a relationship. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, and mental and interpersonal control at the expense of flexibility. And they are they show more than 4 of the following: preoccupied with details, rules, lists, order, or schedules to the extent that the major point of the activity is lost; rigidity and stubbornness; perfectionism that interferes with task completion; excessively devoted to work and productivity to the exclusion of leisure activities and friends; they're overly conscientious and inflexible about matters of morals or ethics; unable to discard worn or worthless objects, even those without sentimental value; reluctant to delegate tasks; and adopts miserly spending style towards self and others. So I worked with a woman that was like this once, and she had a child, and the child was completely bogged down with anxiety because she had a million rules, regulations, and tasks that needed to be completed all the time, and he could never really get anything accomplished because he was constantly trying to adhere to what she wanted from him. He became kind of like an overly dependent person and kind of a yes person when it came to that relationship, because I think he found that he would get exhausted if he tried to do things a different way. And so he kind of tried to just go along with her way. But it was tough. I remember going to her house, and she was overly conscientious. Like, she really wanted to make sure I felt comfortable, but I would look around and notice that it was almost like being in a hoarder space because there were so many things there, even though they were kind of on the lower income bracket. So it's almost like she couldn't let go of anything, because letting go would mean letting go of control. And so, she was always like working and trying to be productive, but never really getting anywhere because it was hard for her to accomplish tasks. And she would create so much in the way that it was hard for her to accomplish tasks and be successful. And then she would struggle to keep up with all of the things in life that needed immediate tending to, like bills and things. So it was a struggle. But that's kind of an example of what someone with obsessive compulsive personality disorder might be. When you first read that, you think, oh, that's like OCD, but with everything in their life. They're obsessed with cleanliness and orderliness. Well, while she was obsessed with almost the ritual of cleanliness and orderliness, her home itself did not look clean and orderly because she was constantly collecting things. So it's kind of a combination there. Anyway. All right, so treatment options for personality disorders. Obviously, each one of these personality disorders is so different, and different goals need to be created for different personality disorders. So what we can do is work on reducing symptomology, improving social and interpersonal functioning, and reducing frequency of maladaptive behaviors and hospitalizations. So you may not always be able to change the deep personality issues or patterns, but we can give people ways to cope, help them recognize and understand their warning signs for themselves of when they're getting too deep and dark in a funk, or they're staying too isolated, or they're getting close to a hospitalization, something like that, and help them with, the skills to accomplish certain tasks. You're going to need to screen for comorbid psychiatric diagnoses, and work on treating those. And if the personality disorder is egosyntonic, antisocial, and narcissistic. So egosyntonic means the symptoms almost work for what the person wants. So ego-dystonic means it kind of goes against what the person ultimately wants. So their symptoms get in the way of their functioning, whereas egosyntonic means that it kind of goes in, they're working congruently with what they want in life. So someone with an antisocial personality disorder has no empathy, and they don't really want to function in society. They don't want to improve socially. They're kind of happy just being who they are. Same thing with a narcissistic personality disorder. The narcissistic traits and symptoms continue to bolster their feelings of self-worth and self-esteem. So it's hard to let go of those symptoms that are negative, that are making them feel better. So it can be really difficult to engage someone in treatment. And in those situations, you have to really focus on consequences and, real world issues that can come from continuing to hold on to those behaviors. And medication can help. So increasing levels of serotonin can reduce depression, impulsiveness, rumination, and enhance a sense of well-being. And neuroleptics and mood stabilizers can be effective in modulating affective stability. But it may not fix all the personality traits, but it will help some. And for therapy, so for borderline personality disorder, dialectical behavioral therapy is the choice, prime choice of treatment, and it's a schema-focused therapy. Transference-focused therapy and mentalization-based treatment have all been found to be effective. Therapy for other disorders are limited to a small number of open-label trials and case studies. But therapy still helps for all the personality disorders, even if it's a little more challenging to get through. And then, of course, you want to screen for comorbid disorders, especially substance abuse, for almost all of these. And the histrionic, so for histrionic personality disorder, you're going to look for somatization disorder because, as I mentioned earlier, someone with a histrionic personality disorder, if, let's say they're at a birthday party and someone's singing happy birthday to someone else, and they aren't appreciating the fact that the attention is not directed at them at all times, they may start by being seductive and trying to get their attention that way, but then at a certain point in the party, they might engage in some fictitious behavior and try to act like maybe they're sick or something to get the attention that way. And then social phobia could be compounding avoidant personality disorder. You want to try to rule that out. Those could be differential diagnoses, or they could be concurrent. And any personality disorder puts the person at higher risk than the general population for drug and alcohol dependence. So you want to be aware of that as well. The other side of the coin is that personality disorders have a negative prognostic significance for axis 1 disorders such as anxiety and mood disorders. So a lot of times it is just going to be the personality that disorder that you're focusing on as opposed to the other comorbid disorders. So personality disorders are common, and they're more common in all of our practices than the general population. It's important to identify personality disordered patients because it informs us how to best approach them. And we need to, screen for those comorbid diagnoses. And of course, ask for help if you're feeling overwhelmed, or get some pointers from a supervisor or consultation from another professional. All right, that's all I have for you today. Hope that shed a little light on personality disorders, and I hope you have a great day. Also, please check the module because I've put some videos of people who are actually struggling with these personality disorders, because I know sometimes it's hard to imagine what that actually looks like when you're just reading the criteria. So take a look in the modules. Thanks.